Nice try, sweetheart. Maybe next time, aim at the same zip code. Laughter erupted behind her, sharp and mocking, as if each voice wanted to outdo the last. Claire Donovan didn't flinch. She simply lowered her rifle, eyes steady, breathing calm, as if the noise behind her was nothing but distant static. Then the range went silent, not because she missed, but because 5 perfect bullet holes sat in the back wall, each one stacked so tight you could cover them with a coin. No one saw it happen. No one even thought it was possible. But when the range officer's face turned pale, everyone knew the quiet woman in logistics was something else entirely. The shooting range had gone deathly quiet. No laughter, no whispers. Just the faint ping of cooling metal drifting through the air, a sound so subtle it could have been mistaken for the ticking of a distant clock. Sunlight streamed through the narrow slits high on the concrete wall, catching motes of dust that hung in the stillness. 5 small craters sat on the far back wall, tight enough to be hidden by a silver dollar. The moment stretched. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed too loudly, because even the least experienced among them knew whatever had just happened wasn't normal. And standing at the firing line, lowering her rifle with a calm, almost absent-minded motion, was Claire Donovan. She didn't look at the target. She didn't look at the instructors or the trainees behind her. She simply engaged the rifle's safety, slung it across her shoulder, and let out a slow, measured breath, as if this were just another Tuesday afternoon. It hadn't always been like this. 6 weeks earlier, no one here would have remembered her name. Claire Donovan was a logistics recruit, average height, average build, brown hair usually tied back into a low practical knot. The kind of face you passed in a hallway without a second glance. She'd arrived at the Federal Military Training Center with a neatly packed duffel, a stack of paperwork in perfect order, and zero desire to draw attention to herself. She was the type who showed up exactly on time. Never early enough to look overeager. Never late enough to invite reprimand. Every checklist she touched was complete. Every supply locker she organized looked like it belonged in a catalog. If the task was dull, repetitive, or purely mechanical, Claire would execute it with unshakable consistency. And in the eyes of most people here, that meant she was part of the background, functional, replaceable, and forgettable. The military's unspoken hierarchy isn't just about rank, it's about purpose. On one side, you have the combat arms, infantry, armor, special operations. These are the warriors whose boots churn through mud in hostile terrain, whose shoulders carry rifles and rucksacks into places where maps stop making sense. They are the sharp edge of the spear, and they know it. On the other side, you have support, logistics, administration, technical maintenance. These are the people who keep fuel flowing, ammunition stocked, and communications working. Without them, combat arms can't fight for more than a few hours before grinding to a halt. And yet, in the culture of most military units, support roles are treated like stagehands at a rock concert. You're useful, yes, but no one bought tickets to see you. It's not that combat soldiers hate support staff. It's more that they barely register them unless something goes wrong. A missing shipment of spare parts, the wrong type of ammunition in the crate, paperwork that holds up a mission clearance. Do your job perfectly and you vanish into invisibility. Make one mistake and everyone suddenly remembers your name. As a former infantry sergeant myself, I'll be honest, most of us were guilty of it. Back in my day, I barely spoke to the supply clerks unless I needed a replacement magazine pouch or a new set of NVG batteries. I assumed they had an easy ride. Air-conditioned offices, fixed schedules, minimal risk. Only after a deployment in which our entire convoy nearly stalled out in the desert, saved only because a logistics specialist pulled off an impossible repair under fire, did I start to realize how narrow my thinking had been. That's the trap of military culture. It glorifies the visible struggle and underplays the invisible work that makes the struggle survivable. Claire seemed perfectly content with her assigned place in this ecosystem. She didn't bristle at the jokes about desk soldiers. She didn't correct anyone when they assumed she'd never held a loaded rifle. She didn't volunteer for extra field drills or compete for the best run times. She simply blended in, moving efficiently through armories, supply depots, and maintenance bays, the way a shadow moves across the floor without catching the eye. If you'd asked the average combat trainee at the center who Claire Donovan was, they might have said, isn't she the one who restocks our ammo cans? And they'd have been right, but also profoundly wrong. Because every so often, in the quiet moments between assignments, someone would notice something odd. The way she stripped and reassembled an M4 in under a minute without looking rushed. The way her gaze tracked movement on the training field like a rangefinder. The way her hands rested on a rifle, not tentative, but familiar, like an old friend. None of it was enough to change her reputation. Not yet. But the truth was already there, hiding in plain sight, waiting for the moment when someone would stop laughing long enough to see it. And that moment was now. The range was silent, the air heavy, 5 bullet holes on the wall, impossibly tight. Claire Donovan stood at attention, invisible no longer. The announcement came at morning formation, the kind that carried across the parade ground like a thrown gauntlet. "All personnel," barked Drill Sergeant Halpern, his voice ricocheting off the concrete walls. "Combat and logistics alike will complete joint marksmanship evaluation this afternoon. No exceptions." A ripple of surprise moved through the ranks. Combat trainees glanced at one another with the faint smirks of people who already knew the outcome. Logistics personnel exchanged more guarded looks. Some of them hadn't fired a rifle since basic, others not at all since entering their current specialty. For most, this was just another training directive. For a few, it was a chance to prove themselves. And for Claire Donovan, it was nothing. She stood at attention, expression unreadable, neither eager nor nervous. If she had thoughts on the matter, they stayed locked behind that calm blue gaze. 2 hours later, the firing range was a carnival of confidence. The combat trainees had gone first, lining up and punching neat clusters into their paper silhouettes at 50 meters. Their performances were predictable. Most of them had handled rifles almost daily for months. The range smelled of burnt powder and oil, echoing with the sharp reports of controlled bursts. By the time the last combat trainee stepped off the line, their little clique had formed near the equipment tables. They stood relaxed, rifles slung, trading exaggerated war stories about their best shots, as if they'd been in country for years instead of months. The logistics section, in contrast, waited in a stiffer formation. They held their rifles like tools borrowed from someone else's garage. Functional, but unfamiliar. The distinction between the two groups was stark, and that was the point. Halpern's eyes found Claire. "Donovan," he called, his tone slicing the air. "You're up." She stepped forward without hesitation. No request for extra time, no excuses. Just a measured walk to the firing line, where she picked up the assigned rifle and ran through the safety checks with mechanical precision. That's when the voices began. $20 says she drops it," muttered Private Kane. "I'll take that bet," replied Corporal Vega, grinning. "But I say she won't even hit the target frame." "She should have brought a water pistol," another chimed in, sending the group into quiet laughter. Claire gave no sign she'd heard them. She loaded her magazine, chambered around, and settled into a stance that looked adequate, not professional, not sloppy, just good enough not to draw correction from an instructor. Halpern's voice took on a syrupy condescension. "You have 5 rounds, Donovan. Target is 50 meters. Try not to embarrass your entire section." The first shot cracked through the air. Spotters lifted their scopes and binoculars. After a moment, one of them frowned. "No hit," he called out. The laughter came instantly. "Missed the whole thing. Were your eyes open? Even stormtroopers have better aim." Second shot, no visible hit. Third, nothing. Fourth, still nothing. By the fifth, the mockery had evolved into full-blown entertainment, with combat trainees elbowing each other and mimicking exaggerated oops faces. Claire remained unchanged. No shift in posture, no flinch. She ejected the magazine, cleared the chamber, and set the rifle down exactly as the procedure dictated. Then she stepped back from the line, hands clasped behind her back, gaze forward. From a military sociology perspective, this wasn't just training, it was theater. In every hierarchical organization, especially the armed forces, public demonstrations serve a purpose beyond skill evaluation. They reinforce the order. By pitting a less valued group against a more valued one in a domain where the latter is guaranteed to excel, leadership sends an unspoken message. Remember your place. It's not always malicious. Sometimes it's about morale, giving the tip of the spear a chance to feel sharp. Sometimes it's about inoculating support personnel against overestimating their combat ability. But often it's about identity. Combat arms thrive on the idea that they are elite, that their work is fundamentally harder and riskier. This belief is reinforced not just through battlefield experience, but through moments like this. Controlled environments where the contrast is obvious and the chain of command can nod in satisfaction as roles are clarified. For logistics recruits, these events can be demoralizing. They know the deck is stacked against them. Their role isn't to impress on the firing line, but to keep the machine running behind it. Yet the optics, especially in a military culture that prizes visible strength, are brutal. And so these staged competitions become ritualized performances of superiority. The laughter, the side bets, the smug camaraderie of the victors, it's not personal to them. It's structural. It's a way of reinforcing a social boundary that says, we fight, you supply. As the laughter echoed off the concrete, Halpern turned to address the group. I think we've learned something important today, he said, gesturing toward Claire without looking at her. There's a reason some of you carry rifles for real, and others keep the paperwork straight. The combat trainees chuckled again, some already turning back toward their gear. The demonstration had served its purpose. The hierarchy had been reaffirmed. Claire stood motionless, eyes forward, letting the noise wash over her like rain on glass. If the mockery touched her, it didn't show. Later, people would remember this moment very differently. Some would recall the laughter. Some would recall the smug certainty that they'd witnessed exactly what they expected. And a few, just a few, would recall the strange calm in her face, the complete absence of embarrassment, like someone who knew something nobody else did. The truth, of course, was already on the back wall. They just hadn't looked yet. The laughter hadn't even faded when Range Safety Officer Master Sergeant Collins stepped forward. He was older than most of the cadre, the kind of man whose movements carried an economy born from decades of soldiering. Collins didn't waste time on dramatics. If he walked somewhere, it was for a reason, and right now his boots were taking him past the untouched paper target. "Sir, she missed all 5, one of the junior instructors began. Collins didn't answer. He knelt beside the wooden target frame, eyes narrowing. Then without a word, he kept going, past the sand-filled berm, past the safety barriers, all the way to the thick concrete back wall designed to catch stray rounds. The rest of the range started to notice his change in direction. A few trainees craned their necks. Someone muttered, "What's he looking for?" He stopped. At chest height, dead center in the section of wall behind Claire's target, were 5 dark craters. Not scattered randomly, not loosely grouped. They were so perfectly stacked that you could hide them under a silver dollar. Collins reached out and brushed his fingers over the chipped concrete. Fresh dust crumbled onto his palm. His jaw tightened. From here, the geometry was undeniable. Each round had passed through the exact same point in space, threading between the paper target and the edge of the wooden frame, a gap barely 2 millimeters wide. He turned slowly, scanning the line back to where Claire stood. Her posture hadn't changed. Rifle slung, eyes forward, expression unreadable. "Sergeant!" one of the drill instructors called. Collins didn't look away from Claire. "Check the back wall." Confusion rippled through the group. The junior instructor jogged over, took one look at the 5 holes and froze. His face drained of color. Without a word, he motioned for others to see. Soon, a small crowd gathered behind the wall, muttering in disbelief. The shift in atmosphere was immediate and sharp. Moments ago, the range had been alive with mockery. Now it was heavy with the kind of silence that only comes when reality refuses to make sense. Private Kane, who'd made the water pistol joke earlier, stared at the wall as if it might blink. "That's not possible," he said, voice flat. "Not at 50 meters, with that gap," Corporal Vega added, shaking his head. "You'd have to, hell, I don't even know how you'd have to aim." Collins turned toward the range's observation deck, where a mounted camera recorded all live fire exercises for review. He pulled up the footage and rewound to Claire's turn. The grainy video showed her stance, her slow, deliberate trigger squeeze. But when Collins replayed the shots frame by frame, the absurdity became even clearer. Wind, a mild left-to-right crosswind, should have pushed each bullet just enough to widen the grouping. It didn't. Recoil, standard M4 recoil should have required micro-adjustments. She never seemed to adjust. Her barrel stayed unnervingly stable. Trajectory, the gap between the target's paper edge and the wooden frame was 2 millimeters. At 50 meters, that's an angular tolerance of about 0.0023 degrees. Miss that angle by a hair, and the bullet shreds paper or wood. Yet she threaded 5 consecutive rounds through it without touching either. From a sniper's physics perspective, this was an impossible shot. Even expert marksmen rely on variables they can control: breathing, trigger discipline, sight alignment. But here, the margin of error was so vanishingly small it bordered on theoretical. The feat wasn't just hitting a small target, it was hitting empty space with surgical precision, multiple times under conditions that made even a one-off lucky shot unlikely. To put it in perspective, a world-class competitive shooter might land 2 or 3 shots in such a gap, with a precision rifle, from a bench rest. Claire had done it standing, with an issued M4, using standard ball ammunition, under the scrutiny of a crowd actively trying to rattle her. And her shot cadence? Identical on each round, as if she'd pre-calculated every factor before the first trigger pull. By now, the combat trainees had gathered near the observation deck, each craning for a glimpse of the footage. No one laughed anymore. Some stood with arms crossed, brows furrowed. Others kept glancing at Claire, as if reassessing everything they'd assumed about her. It's fascinating, watching confidence erode in real time. In military culture, bravado is currency, and here it was being devalued with every second they stared at those bullet holes. Collins walked back to the firing line. His eyes never left Claire as he stopped in front of Halpern, the drill sergeant who had orchestrated the demonstration. "She didn't miss," Collins said quietly. Halpern frowned. "What are you talking about? The papers?" "Forget the paper. Look at the wall." Halpern did, and in that moment, the change in his face mirrored the shock already spreading through the trainees. A recognition that the support clerk standing before them had just done something only a handful of people on the planet might even attempt. The air on the range was different now. The laughter had curdled into something heavier. Not respect, at least not yet, but a dawning awareness that they were in the presence of someone whose capabilities lay far beyond their own. Somewhere behind them, Private Kane muttered under his breath, "Who the hell is she?" Nobody answered, because in that silence they all knew one thing for certain. Whatever Claire Donovan's file said, it didn't tell the whole story. The echo of the last whispered question, "Who the hell is she?" still hung in the air when a new voice cut through the silence. "Clear the range." It wasn't loud, but it carried the kind of weight that made people obey before they even thought about it. From the far end of the observation deck, a man stepped into view. Staff Sergeant Marcus Reed. No unit patch, no name tape. His uniform bore only the subdued American flag on one shoulder and the faint outline where other insignia had once been ripped away. He moved like someone who'd spent years in places where movement meant survival. Halpern straightened instinctively, though his tone held a trace of defiance. "This is my range, Staff Sergeant. You can't just—" Reed's gaze cut to him. "I said clear it. Now." Something in his eyes, calm, but with a depth that hinted at storms, made even Halpern take a step back. Within minutes, the range emptied. The trainees left in clumps, muttering theories under their breath, glancing over their shoulders at Claire. When the last set of boots faded into the distance, Reed walked toward her. She hadn't moved from her spot at the firing line. 7 years, he said, stopping a few feet away. 7 years we've been looking for you." Claire's eyes flicked up to meet his. No surprise, no guilt, just quiet acknowledgement. "I wasn't hiding." Reed gave a humorless chuckle. "Phantom Wraith doesn't just disappear from the most classified sniper program in existence and end up cleaning rifles at a basic training facility. That's called hiding." The nickname hung between them. Phantom Wraith, whispered in certain circles like a myth. Stories of impossible shots taken from unimaginable distances. Targets eliminated from angles that shouldn't exist. And always the same detail. No one ever saw the shooter. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Reed broke the silence. Syria. Operation Black Fathom. We got the report. Team wiped out. Mission compromised. UKIA. There were survivors, Claire said evenly. Just not the ones you counted on. Reed's jaw tightened. What happened? What happened, she said, voice low but edged with steel, is that I learned the difference between serving your country and serving the people who give the orders. That mission wasn't about protecting American lives. It was about protecting a politician's career. We were sent into a kill box, and when it went bad, they wrote us off to erase their mistake. Her eyes were flat now. The blue turned cold. I lost my team because someone wanted a headline, and I decided I'd never take another shot unless I chose the reason. From the outside, it's easy to romanticize the life of an elite operator. Precision, discipline, the thrill of mastering the impossible. But there's a price. The higher you climb, the more invisible the real battles become. Every mission carries the weight of the ones you didn't come back from. Every successful shot carves another notch in a ledger you can never balance. Survivor's guilt isn't just about living when others didn't. It's about wondering if your presence meant someone else had to die. For people like Claire, it's not the missions that break them. It's the politics, the compromises, the knowledge that skill is being spent on goals they don't believe in anymore. Walking away doesn't erase the training. It doesn't undo the reflexes. But it can be the only way to keep your conscience intact. Reed studied her for a long time. You could come back, he said finally. Different unit, different leadership. We could use you. She shook her head. I am where I need to be. I do more good here than I would in the shadows again. You think training raw recruits is a better use of Phantom Wraith? No, she said quietly. I think showing them that skill and humility can exist in the same person is better use of Claire Donovan. For the first time since he'd arrived, Reed's expression softened. Just a little. You know they'll keep looking for you. Let them, she replied, turning away. If they find me, it'll be because I wanted them to. As Reed left the range, he glanced back one last time. Claire was already at the bench, breaking down the rifle piece by piece, hands moving with the same silent precision that had left 5 perfect bullet holes in the wall. The legend of Phantom Wraith might have been buried in classified archives, but standing there, it was clear. She wasn't gone. She had simply chosen a different battlefield. It started quietly without announcements or schedules. A few nights after the range incident, 3 trainees from the logistics section slipped into the converted maintenance shed at the far end of the base. They found Claire already there, a small table lamp casting a warm circle of light over a dismantled M4, several boxes of mixed ammunition, and a paper target pinned to a plywood board. She didn't greet them with speeches or orders, just a nod toward the empty chairs and a simple, "We'll start with breathing." These sessions became a pattern. No official records, no sign-up sheets. The door was always locked from the inside, and the only curriculum was whatever skill Claire decided to pass on that night: marksmanship, fieldcraft, situational awareness. The combat trainees never got invited. Claire's group was made up of those who were willing to listen more than they spoke, who were comfortable spending an hour in silence perfecting a grip or adjusting a stance. She corrected them sparingly, but when she did, the change in their performance was instant and obvious. She never mentioned her past. She never called herself Phantom Wraith. Leadership without rank is a strange thing in the military. The entire system is built on visible authority, insignia, position, formal orders. Yet there's another kind of influence, one that doesn't rely on command structures. It's the influence that comes from earned trust, not mandated obedience. Claire didn't have to tell anyone to respect her. They just did because she proved, without ever saying it, that she could do things most of them thought impossible. This style of leadership is quieter, but in some ways more enduring. Soldiers might follow a rank because they have to, but they'll follow a mentor because they want to. And once that respect is given freely, it can't be taken away by a transfer order or a change in command. Outside the military, you see the same pattern. In any workplace, there are people who seem to fade into the background until something goes wrong, and suddenly they're the ones everyone turns to. They're not chasing promotions or titles. They don't decorate their desk with Employee of the Month plaques. Instead, they build credibility over years of consistent, competent work. They solve problems quietly, mentor newcomers, and make decisions that keep everything moving even when no one's watching. They don't just do their job. They make everyone else's job easier without demanding the spotlight. For Claire, staying invisible wasn't about fear. It was about choice. When you've seen the sharp end of the spear, when you've walked away from missions that carved names into your memory, you realize that visibility can be a liability. Fame draws attention, and attention draws agendas. People want to use you, to put your skills to work for their objectives, whether or not you believe in them. By remaining a shadow, Claire controlled when and how she acted. She could decide who to train, what lessons to pass on, and when to step back. No bureaucratic oversight, no political interference. No one could order her into another kill box. There's a paradox here. The most dangerous person in the room is often the one no one notices. And the most effective leaders are sometimes the ones whose names aren't on the wall. Claire had become both. Her trainees didn't just learn how to shoot straighter or move quieter. They learned to see differently, to question the obvious, to look past surface impressions, to recognize the value in people the system ignored. And in that way, her influence spread far beyond the walls of the maintenance shed. She didn't need a rank. She didn't need a title. Because real power isn't in being recognized. It's in deciding when to reveal what you're capable of. And for Claire Donovan, anonymity wasn't a limitation. It was her most strategic advantage. I could have hit that paper target. Perfect center mass, 5 holes touching, just like the manual says. They would have nodded, maybe even offered a stiff, good job, and gone on believing exactly what they believed before. That's not why I came here. I didn't want to prove I could shoot. I wanted to make them look. Paper targets tell you who can pass the test. Back walls tell you who can rewrite the test. So I aimed for the empty space. The space no one was watching. The space between their expectations and reality. 5 times in a row, I threaded that space until it was impossible to ignore. I wasn't trying to win their approval. I was trying to break their frame. First lesson, competence doesn't need a certificate. The best proof of skill isn't a badge on your chest or a framed document on the wall. It's what you can do when the pressure is high and the outcome matters. Titles fade. Awards gather dust. Real mastery lives in the moment someone needs you to deliver, and you do. Second lesson, the quietest person in the room can change everything. Loud threats give you time to prepare. Silent ones leave you no time at all. We're taught to measure worth by volume, by the ones who speak first, move fastest, or take up the most space. But more often than not, the person you've overlooked has been watching, calculating, waiting for the moment when one move changes the whole game. Third lesson, some legends live best in the dark. Fame is noisy, and noise attracts agendas. When you're visible, someone will always try to claim you, to use your skill for their own ends. Staying in the shadows means keeping control, choosing when to step forward and when to let the world keep guessing. It's not about hiding. It's about deciding who gets to see what you're capable of, and when. I didn't join this training program to stand in the spotlight. I came here to teach without being noticed, to pass on what matters without the politics, the missions that serve headlines instead of people. Those 5 bullet holes aren't my victory. They're a reminder that invisibility is not weakness, that staying quiet can be a strategy, that sometimes the best way to protect what you value is to keep it where no one can reach it. If you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or dismissed before you even had a chance to prove yourself, I want you to hear this. You don't need everyone to see your worth for it to be real. You don't need applause to validate the work you've done. What you need is the moment you decide it's time to show them, and the courage to follow through. When that moment comes, you'll know. You won't need permission. You won't need fanfare. You'll just breathe, aim, and act. And maybe when it's over, there will be a few people left standing in the stunned silence, staring at the back wall, wondering how they missed what was in front of them all along. If this story stayed with you, if you saw yourself in those 5 bullet holes, Then subscribe to our channel and share this video with someone who needs the reminder. Because sometimes the most powerful thing we can give each other isn't a cheer from the sidelines. It's the quiet recognition that strength doesn't always wear a uniform you can see. And if you remember nothing else, remember this. It's not about the target they expect you to hit. It's about the one they never saw coming.